Shabbat Shalom, Saints. Welcome to another S.A.L.T Ministries video. I am Brother Winston Shelby, and this is your 7-minute sermon. This is a special edition this time. I'm going to read an excerpt from a book I'm writing titled Persevering Through the Storm. Way before I was saved, when I was younger, I had gone through some relationships with one-night stands. After the breakup between my daughter's mom and me, I had always had a girlfriend or someone I could call and hook up with for one night, so I never really felt alone until the time in my life where I did feel completely alone and even abandoned. There was this stretch of time, probably around 6 months or more, when I was 23 years old, where I could not land a date. I felt empty and I felt like I had been tossed aside. It seemed like everyone around me had someone except me. The fact I was lonely, taking drugs and drinking excessively finally came to a head one balmy summer night. I was back living at my stepdad and my mom's house. It was early evening and the sun was setting. I was in my room with the door closed, sipping alcohol and watching television. Without much thought of it, earlier that day, I had been to the pharmacy to buy some sleeping pills. It was like I was on autopilot when I bought them. At the time, I hadn't realized, but it was premeditated murder. The thought of suicide wasn't in the forefront of my mind, but it lay dormant in my subconscious mind. I felt this overwhelming sense of depression and despair cloak me in darkness. Thoughts of inadequacy raced through my mind. I started to feel like I was taking up oxygen and space in this world. I thought about calling someone to talk about my feelings, but I felt no one would understand how I was feeling. Out of all the people I knew, I was either too embarrassed or too ashamed or just felt they could not understand the emotions I was feeling. Reluctantly, I called my daughter's mom and mustered up enough courage to threaten that I felt like ending my life. Through quieted sobs and tears streaming down my face, I said flatly, "I think I'm going to kill myself." All of this was taking place when my mom and stepdad were in the house, literally in the next room. I can't imagine how my mom or stepdad would have felt if they had found me unresponsive or worse, expired in their house without any true knowledge of why. They're not lying when they stated depression is a silent killer. But that thought never occurred to me in that instance. I was too self-absorbed with my own pain to be concerned with me causing someone else hurt, heartache, or pain. My ex tried to reason with me and plead with me and tell me that I had daughters to live for, if nothing else. I rationalized that they would be better without me. The evil spirits of depression, despair, anxiety, self-loathing, self-hatred, alcoholism, and drug addiction played with my mind, riddled my body, and plagued my soul. I hung up the phone to her voice trailing off saying, "You've got to think about your daughters." I cracked the seal on the bottle and started taking sleeping pills one at a time. Eventually, I began to get drowsy and my eyelids grew heavy. The TV started appearing and sounding further away, as if my bedroom was stretching into a long, narrow corridor, and the television was drifting further away. I faded into a deep, pitch black darkness of sleep. I awoke the next morning to my beeper going off incessantly. I ignored it. I didn't know what time it was, but I did know that I was still alive. I slowly opened my crust-filled eyes to blinding sunlight. My head felt heavy like a medicine ball, and I was extremely groggy. I dragged my hungover self out of bed and stumbled to the bathroom. I put one hand up on the wall as I relieved myself. Suddenly, I felt like I had to throw up, too. I hurried up and emptied as much of the toxic waste as I could, floating around inside my stomach out. I peered at myself in the mirror. I looked like crap. I splashed cold water on my face, which did little to nothing. I heard the side gate open and I heard the doorbell ring. I guess I didn't respond fast enough because my buddy started tapping on my window and calling out my name. "I know you're home. Your car's out front, man," my homie said, voice muffled through the glass. I sluggishly went and opened the door. We made some small talk and he asked me if I wanted to go drink some beer with one of his other friends. It was barely even noon, but I reluctantly said yes anyway. We drove in his car for roughly 15 minutes and I explained to him what I almost did to myself the night before, but for some reason I didn't die. He kind of chuckled. Not once did he offer any consolation or kind and loving words, as if someone attempting suicide and surviving was a daily occurrence. No, this was definitely out of the ordinary. But in his defense, maybe he didn't know how to react or what to say to me. We got to an alley and parked behind a garage. We exited the car, traveled through your typical Chicago gangway, and came to a back porch stairwell and climbed 3 stories to this dude's apartment. My homeboy knocked on the door. There was a big square glass window in the middle of the door with a sheer curtain so we could see movement inside the apartment. The guy came and opened the door, glanced at us, and without a smile and with a deadpan tone invited us in. My homie introduced me and the guy as we walked in. I think that he said his name was Ken or something like that, but I wasn't sure. I didn't know this guy and I never really got the chance to ask my buddy how he met this new friend. I noticed his apartment was pretty sparse as we made our way through the kitchen into the living room. A medium-sized oval kitchen table with 3 chairs, an old dusty-looking tan couch, a scarred-up wooden coffee table, the 4th chair to the kitchen set, one of those old television stands with the little wheels on the bottom, and an old color television with a VCR on top. Some type of rock concert footage was playing on the TV. Me and my friend sat on the couch. He offered us some beers and we accepted. We made small talk. I asked him whose concert it was that we were watching on television, and he mentioned there was this group called Ministry. I knew of the one song that they had made several years prior when they first hit the music scene. It was a song that I actually had liked. It was titled Every Day is Halloween. I guess my friend thought it would be interesting or funny to mention that I had attempted suicide just the night before. I didn't really appreciate him saying anything about that. I hadn't known this other guy for more than 30 minutes, and here my buddy was bringing up my personal business. The guy actually sort of joked about the situation. How are you still alive? Shouldn't you be at the hospital, man? He chuckled sarcastically with a smirk on his face. The heavy metal music on the television seemed to get a little louder. The band was playing in a frenzy. I looked at the TV and the lead singer was clutching the mic in both hands while looking directly into the camera. I guess someone was looking out for you, he said flatly. The mood in the room felt dark, heavy, and ominous, almost like it was a question. I said, yeah, I guess God was. That very instant, the lead singer in the video started screaming and cursing out God, the Lord Jesus, and blaspheming like I had never heard before. I felt nauseous and dizzy. At that same instant, I experienced my soul drop what felt like 10 feet out of my body into this freezing cold, yet humid and muggy, slimy, disgusting, huge cavernous underworld. I was sitting on a ledge glancing down. I could still see my body above me on the couch, almost like I was a zombie, watching the television and hearing the blasphemous words spewing like vomit from the singer's mouth. My buddy and the other guy were still talking, but I couldn't respond. Meanwhile, below me in the dense fogginess of this pit of hell I was in, I could see arms flailing about, screams and pleas of help. Some souls were yelling at me, cussing me out, and cursing God out. I was frightened, ashamed, and confused at the same time. But what I did know for a fact was I knew that I was glimpsing into Satan's realm. I was looking into hell. After the lead singer completed his hellish tirade against God, my soul was shot back into my body like a high-rise elevator landing on the floor I want to get off at. I was sick to my stomach. I didn't want any more beer, and I definitely didn't want to watch any more of that rock video. I just wanted to leave that apartment as fast as I possibly could without appearing rude. Somehow, something gave me the strength, which I now know is the Holy Spirit, to say I was ready to leave. So that's what we did. A few days later, I don't know what I was thinking. Obviously, I wasn't thinking when I agreed to go back to that guy's apartment. I asked my buddy if he had spoken to the dude, and his reply was, nah, his phone is disconnected. But I thought we'd just roll through and have a few beers with him if he's at his house. I wasn't tripping too hard on what happened. Besides, I was thirsty, and I could use a cold beer. I definitely knew something was wrong with the energy in that apartment, but I didn't have enough scriptural knowledge back then at that point to know exactly what it was. I now know that it was demonic and satanic energy around me in that apartment. I thank Elohim that I at least had the faith of a mustard seed back then, because I know that's what helped me. What saved me from death and eternal damnation. I had just enough hope in Jesus that I believe God deployed his holy angels to protect me. Needless to say, when we got back over to the no-name guy's apartment, it felt weird but not menacing, as we once again parked in the alley in front of the garage behind his building. As we reached the top of the landing, we can see through the cheap, sheer flowery curtains. My homie grabbed the handle to the rickety wooden screen door and slowly pulled it open with a creak. It was still daylight out, so we both peered in through the back door window. We could see clearly into the apartment. It looked empty, as if no one lived there anymore. It was almost as if we dreamed of her being there in the first place. I was confused, relieved, and a little creeped out all at the same time. It was like this guy whose name we weren't sure of had just vanished. My buddy said the guy never mentioned moving and his phone and beeper were both shut off. Thing is, we didn't even really know this guy. My friend couldn't even remember how or where he met him. Now, I know that Elohim sends angels to people. Well, I think Lucifer can send demons or at least possess people. So there's no doubt in my mind that I glimpsed into hell when I attempted suicide. And I thank God that I didn't die, because I didn't have a relationship with God or Jesus back then at all. I knew of him, but I didn't know him. So I just thank God that he saved my life and redeemed me. And now I'm living for him. Shalom, saints.